Hi everyone, it's me, Sandy Cruz of Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. For years now, I've been bringing to you conversations about wellness from incredible guests from all over the world. Discover a fresh take on healthy living for midlife and beyond, one that embraces balance and reason without letting only science dictate every aspect of our wellness. Join me and my guests as we explore ways that we can age gracefully with in-depth conversations about the thyroid, about hormones, and other alternative wellness options for you and your family. True wellness nurtures a healthy body, mind, spirit, and soul. And we cover all of these essential aspects to help you live a balanced, joyful life. Be sure to follow my show, rate it, review it, and share it. Always remember, my friends, balanced living works. Hi everyone, welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today with me, I have Neil Markey, and he is of Beckley Retreats. And we're going to talk all about microdosing. This entire world of, trauma and different therapies has gotten massive, and you just don't know where to turn to, not just for advice, just more or less just to see if it resonates with you, for you. So that's what this conversation is about. We are not at all condoning the use of illegal substances. That's not what this is about, because as most of you know, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you choose that this is something that's right for you, then you're going to find a way. You're going to travel somewhere where it's not illegal or whatever it is that you decide to do. So the conversation is truly just to give you some information, and then you go and decide on what's right for you. This is not medical guidance or anything of that sort. I just wanted to make that really clear right off the bat. I wasn't sure if I was going to give any personal insights into microdosing with mushrooms. And by mushrooms, we're talking about magic mushrooms, so psilocybin. And I do have a little bit of experience with this. And I don't know about you guys, but back when I was in university, the two big things was cannabis and mushrooms. Now, mushrooms not as often as cannabis, but those are two big things. This is in the early 90s. And I don't know, back then it just didn't seem so confusing. It was just like, yeah, let's take mushrooms tonight, or yeah, let's smoke some weed. And there weren't all these different kinds, and you just would take it. And, we joke about it now. It's like, okay, with the mushrooms, here's a little cap for you and another little cap for you. Nobody really measured. It's just like, all right, this looks even. Let's just go with it. That was the world that I come from. Now, we know all the different varieties and what different varieties can do. And, it's actually pretty confusing, I have to say. So this conversation is meant to just provide a little more insight so that you're not as confused. And then it's up to you to go and research it further. A couple of announcements. I am very active on my Substack. I am going to be releasing a new short form podcast, which I haven't decided on a launch date because I like to do things when it really resonates with me and when I am energetically aligned. I've recorded a number of episodes. It's a short form podcast between 6 and 16 minutes that you will have access to through my Substack. And that is sandycruz.substack.com. The link will be in the show notes here today. sandykruse.substack.com. This podcast is really to help you think about things in a different light as it relates to wellness. The wellness world has become extremely crowded. It's full of ego, power, greed, and most of you who follow me know that my number one priority is passion over profit. I don't give a shit to be famous on a stage and speak. I really don't. And if I do speak, it's great, whatever. I don't seek it out. My entire premise is to help people live healthier and happier lives and age better. Period. That's it. That's my premise in this world and my goal for Sandy K Nutrition for the last, 8 years? I've been on the social media platforms. This podcast has hit 5. And yeah, follow me on all of my social media channels. It's just Sandy K Nutrition everywhere. My new podcast will be called Think About It, What's Real in Wellness by Sandy K. So please go follow me there. And definitely join me on Rumble, on YouTube, where I do post some of my my raw interviews. Go follow me there. Now, remember one thing, because I do this for free each and every week, it's just really important that you share my episodes, that you follow me wherever it is, that you follow social media, and that you actually would really, really be great if you can rate and review my podcast as well, because that's how I get to have these amazing guests each and every week. And now let's cut on through to this amazing interview with Neil Markey. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today with me, I have a special guest. His name is Neil Markey, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Beckley Retreats. The Beckley Foundation has been instrumental in furthering psychedelic research and influencing policy, enabling access to safe, legal, and transformative psychedelic ceremonies. Neil is adamant that plant treatment and meditation were major factors in preserving his life. After being a captain in the U.S. Army Special Operations 2nd Ranger Battalion, Neil enrolled to study at Columbia University. During this time, Neil struggled with depression and PTSD. This prompted him to investigate psychedelics and mindfulness in order to start working on his healing journey and develop coping mechanisms. Over the years, Neil's research has impressed on him even more that there is no real divide between science and spirituality. We were just talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, along with the rest of the team at Beckley Retreats, Neil is eager to share with others the science-backed benefits of psychedelics that can improve overall holistic well-being. So you're really blending the science with the holistic, and I love that, Neil. And today we're going to be discussing psychedelics through major life stresses, including PTSD, life changes like menopause, and more. And when is microdosing a good potential to help? And when might someone go deeper on a psychedelic journey? Now, before I start this conversation, I do want to preface it with a disclaimer to say that we are not condoning any kind of illegal substances. You must speak with your own practitioner on what is right for you. We are not giving you any kind of medical advice here. This podcast is simply just for educational and informational purposes. So we're not saying what's right for you, what's not right for you. I just want to make sure that that is clear at the start. And I want to welcome you, Neil. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we already connected a little bit as Neil, you know, I personally like to connect with my guest a little in advance just so that we can get a vibe. And I think we've got a vibe going. I think we
I,
do,
I think so
Neil.
too.
I
Yeah.
think so. I think so. He likes that I thought he was way younger than he is. So,
Well, and I felt the same about you.
yeah, exactly. So, I have to ask you about your story because you definitely have a story that led you to Beckley Retreats and what you do now and all the research that you're doing. So, let us know what led you to what you do.
Yeah, it's been a windy road. I'll give you the kind of short version, and then if you want to drill in someplace we can. But I was studying math in my undergrad, and then September 11th happened, and next thing you know, I joined the service. I went into ROTC thinking I was doing the right thing, and ended up in Iraq, and then had a chance to go try out for a really small special operations unit that you mentioned, the Ranger Regiment, and went to Afghanistan twice with them. And you know, I was quite fortunate, frankly, relative to many, but it still left some marks on me, like without question. And now, with the benefit of hindsight, looking back, especially in the Rangers, most of the guys in that unit had PTSD because it was just such an intense, nearly unbelievable lifestyle for quite some time. And I got out in 2012, so 12 coming up on 13 years ago, and went to grad school. And by some measures, was doing well. I was at a really good school, and in that first year, you get internship job offers, and I was getting good job offers, but I was also really struggling. I was isolating a bit. I was using alcohol more than I should. I was having a really hard time sleeping. My relationships were struggling. And I think, one of the huge insights for me now, and through all this, is that there's a lot of people out there in the world that have a tremendous amount of pain. Um, but you might not know it. They're showing up, but there's a lot going on inside. And so I think, I was showing up. And I tried a lot of different traditional approaches, SSRIs, anti-anxiety medications, sleeping pills, cognitive behavioral therapy, and didn't have a whole lot of luck. This is a very typical veteran story, unfortunately. And then the pivot point for me was I got introduced to meditation and met this really kind older man who was teaching a course at the university I was at, and was getting his PhD. And he took me under his wing and kind of started teaching me meditation. And then through that network of people over those years, I had the chance to have some professionally facilitated psychedelic experiences, and those were profound. And then there's been a lot that's happened kind of between
Mm.
today and then, but that was kind of my first exposure to it, was trying to feel better myself.
You know, I just before I drill down on a few more questions, PTSD, my grandfather, who was in the war, had severe PTSD. And this is back, I'm Croatian. That's my descent. And back then, they used to say whenever he would have a traumatic, PTSD, I don't even know what you would refer to it as, like an episode, or they would say the devil is coming. This is way, way back when there weren't diagnoses for PTSD and there was no help. And so alcohol was the only thing.
Yeah.
And, I this is in my lineage. This is in my family. War, PTSD, severe traumatic experiences. And I think that people don't often know where to turn. So you would you say that going into that professionally guided psychedelic experience was when it actually changed? Because I've done some research just on talk therapy, and they say that that doesn't work.
Yeah, it was, I think, in some ways, the acceleration of what I was trying to do with meditation and the beginning of, um, a path that has taken quite some time, you know. There's a saying that, it's the deeper the trauma, the more times it needs to be let go. I think there's truth in that. So I don't think people shouldn't go into these experiences thinking they're going to necessarily be like one and done.
Yeah.
Some people, but a lot of people, many people do have pretty substantial shifts after one or two experiences. But then you got to remember that, these ways of being end up being quite kind of worn into us. And so there's like memory there, there's momentum there. And so even though you might get some relief for a period of time, you've actually got to like put some work into trying to put in new pathways to feel kind of sustained benefit. And then you add on top of that that life keeps coming at us, so it's really, you've got to develop a different way to live. You're not going to kind of get to this end state where it's just all, I mean, maybe there's enlightened beings out there, but for most of us, it's a daily effort and you got to kind of just learn how to live differently.
I would agree with that. I know a lot of individuals who work with trauma, who work with energy and energy healing. And there are so many layers. And one practitioner actually said to me, she said, men are like onions, women are actually like golf balls. And even so, I felt like, no offense to you, Neil, but I do think that women are generally more complicated beings. I really do.
I
But
do not, I'm not arguing with you there.
in all ways, I talk a lot about hormones and supplementation. And I'm like, okay, women, sorry, we're a little more complicated. But what I will say, I do agree. I think that the whole one and done approach in anything needs to, like, you don't go work out for one day and think that
Right.
you're going to have the benefits. I think for us as humans, especially as we age, we have to work on things every day. We have to work on our mental health, our mental resiliency. You know, I think that's very important that you pointed that out. You don't just go and I will say a lot of this kind of comes from celebrity where they go, "Oh, I went on this retreat and I came back and I was healed."
I'm
You
healed.
hear, and I'm like, I don't think it works that way. I think
Yeah.
what do you think?
No, I don't think it generally does. I think some people have very significant experiences that then, for quite some time, allow them to have a very different way of being and perspective on themselves. But that'll fade and you're going to revert back to your kind of old ways because, like I said, there's all that momentum there. And so everyone's different. I think it just depends. I also don't like um, maybe the more establishment mindset. I've gotten into some debates with one in particular, very well known, who will leave unnamed, Western psychiatrist who doesn't like the work that we're doing because he says that, anything related to mental health is a long game. And I don't disagree with that. But he also says that, some of this stuff, it'll take people 10 years. And I'm like, well, if you go into it thinking that it's going to take 10 years, you're probably boxing yourself into that. I don't think it necessarily has to take 10 years for you to have some pretty significant shifts. So it just depends. Everybody's so different. And different interventions work differently for different people. And so this idea that's that one way is the right way for everyone is just a bit, I think it's a bit limited. It's not true.
Hmm.
People gotta and that's, I think, what we try and help people find find the path that works for them, and it might be quite different depending on the individual.
Yeah, and I think that people can think of it as one tool for your tool belt, because like I use a lot of different tools. My gosh,
Hmm.
like and even for a lot of you women out there who are going through perimenopause or menopause, well, if you think you're going to just take a hormone and go, okay, I'm perfect and I'm fine, and I'm, oh, mentally so clear and I'm as thin as I want to be and healthy, well, there's no magic pill for anything. You just have to do the work. So I think psychedelics might be an option as one of those tools that you can have in your
Yeah.
tool belt. And it's almost like, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard this where, you do some work, you might have a really amazing experience where you open things up and you did a lot of, maybe that allowed you to heal because you opened things up. And then you might be fine for a whole year and you might not. And then you'll go, okay, I feel called to do another journey. I want to go deeper now. Does this make sense, Neil?
Yeah, I think that's quite common. We have people that are coming back on our programs like once a year. Um, Again, everyone's different. I think you want to try and use your intuition and tune in and be guided by that. I don't think anybody can tell you that this is the frequency. I think there's probably um, a frequency that's too frequent, and I don't think you want to be chasing it. And um, the intention needs to be right around the experience. I mean, you can use these plants and compounds negligently, like you can many other things too. So if you're just using them to get high and get away from things and kind of you're chasing the thrill, there's probably some more risks to that for sure. Um, but yeah, I think that once, twice a year, every other year, something like that, so long if it's done in a safe environment, I think we'll have more and more people that kind of, you know, fall into that camp for sure.
Okay, here's a question for you. I know you mentioned meditation and you mentioned escape. Do you think meditation can sometimes be like almost like an addiction and an escape too?
Yeah.
Because
So
I think I do that. Like when I just want to shut, but I don't know, maybe what I'm doing is actually okay for me because it's like I reach this tipping point and I'm like, oh my God, I need to escape and I need to go and meditate. And I do.
I similarly, it's I mean, I do it quite disciplined now. But it's kind of like fitness for me where I developed kind of a habit for fitness earlier in my life because of sports and then the service. And you're like, I just have to go to the gym. I have to move my body. I'm like stir crazy. I know I need to go. And now I have that same kind of sensation where it's meditation. It's just like, oh my gosh, I gotta sit. I gotta it's, um, and so I don't know. I guess it just depends. I also know people, and this is documented. There's people that have had psychotic breaks with too much meditation, and I think that
Yes.
meditation can depending on the intention. I mean, you can be like a high functioning, really happy go lucky, productive member of society and have a meditation practice, and actually think meditation can help you do all those things. Or I've met people that fit into this bucket and they can be very apathetic and they've detached and they're meditating very frequently, but they don't have interaction with the world and they're in almost a really, from my perspective, they're not in a good state. So I just think it depends, it just depends. But more meditation is not necessarily better, you gotta do almost everything within some balance.
That's so interesting. I read that too. And that about the psychotic breaks and too much in meditation. I'm like, am I meditating too much? Like, but I do get it because I tend to want to just shut off. So let's get into a little bit about journeys, psychedelics. So maybe explain to me, like, what are psychedelics? Is it only mushrooms? Are we talking about ayahuasca? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. There's a few different kind of schools of thought out there, but generally psychedelics the word means kind of mind manifesting. And so it's drugs that change your perception of reality in a big way. So this whole world shifts. And in that bucket is mushrooms, ayahuasca you mentioned, um, mescaline. There's a toad that secretes um, a compound that people can inhale, and it gives you a really profound um, experience. And so there's a handful of compounds that are in this kind of more classical world of psychedelics, and then there's ones that are usually bucketed in psychedelics but aren't a classic psychedelic, like MDMA, which was just unfortunately, in my perspective, denied by the FDA for treatment for PTSD. And then there's ketamine, which is a horse tranquilizer and used by military medics on the battlefield. It's a disassociative, so it kind of takes you out of your body. And some people would say it's a psychedelic, some wouldn't, but they all are like pretty powerful chemicals that will dramatically change. It's all dose dependent, but at a certain dose would like dramatically change how you see the world and your experience of yourself.
Okay. Are these, so I know that in Canada, some of these substances are legal when you work with a licensed therapist. Is it the same thing by state in the US?
Yeah, it's changing. And so right now, all psychedelics outside of ketamine, um, I'm pretty sure that's the case, yes, um, are illegal from a federal perspective. So in the states, we have the funky thing where you got federal laws and then state laws.
Mhm.
So that's true across the board. Mushrooms, federally illegal, class one substance. So in the same bucket as heroin, or amphetamines. It's a bit, mad, and so hopefully that'll change. And then some states have started passing legislation that are changing their laws. So are the first one that did it for mushrooms was Oregon, and so they have a developing industry where you can go and with a licensed facilitator at a licensed place have a mushroom experience in a controlled environment. And then Colorado is coming online now. And then quite a few states have kind of decriminalized it and at least said, hey, it's not a priority for our police departments to go arrest people that are taking mushrooms, which is good. But it's still very much a patchwork. And lots of, Massachusetts just had it on the ballot during this last election cycle to do something similar to what was going on in Oregon and Washington State. It did not pass. But many different state level initiatives to kind of get things changing because it should, I mean, the fact that like mushrooms are a Schedule One is completely detached from the reality. If you look at like a risk perspective and compare it to alcohol or cigarettes or sugar, even, I mean, it's a bit insane, but things are changing. So I'm optimistic.
Oh, that's good. I know mushrooms are still not legal in Canada, but I think that's changing too. Just like
Yeah.
cannabis in Canada is legal. Well, in Ontario it is. I think it's legal everywhere in Canada. But anyway, the thing is, I read that, and I'm going to try and find it. Neil, maybe if you have it, there's a number of different research articles that point to the various dangers associated with different substances. And alcohol was like what was it like?
Uh,
I think,
Number one,
was it number one or
David.
was cocaine or something number
No,
one?
alcohol's number one. I think you're talking about the David Nutt study from the UK,
Maybe.
that's cited quite often. And I actually have a pretty wild story about that. The serendipity. When I was in grad school, that was done in 2011, I think. and then it was in The Economist magazine, and the output was a chart that said all these different drugs racked and
Yeah.
stacked by harm to self, harm to others, and then you
Yes.
get this kind of like net harm score. Yeah, that was done in the UK by the guy that was in charge of their kind of, I don't know, equivalent of the FDA or something close to that, like in the States. He got pushed out of his post because of that, because it was so taboo for this guy to say what he said, but was, based on data. And yeah, at the top is alcohol. And I remember, this is when I'm going through my process transiting down the surface. And I remember that chart so clearly and being like, man, we've really got it backwards, like, and then, over those next few years, had my own personal experiences with psychedelics. Well, the architect behind that study is Amanda Fielding. And so the woman that I work with and co-founded Beckley Retreats with, and I didn't realize that until we had actually started working together. And then we had a conversation, and I was saying how meaningful that chart had been to me in my life. And she was like, Neil, I'd like that. That was my study. And we did it with David. And it was just like, oh, wow, what a full circle moment. But yeah, it's alcohol is really bad for you. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible. It's really, really bad. And it destroys families, and oh my God, drinking and driving, and uh uh but we do it all the time. It's the one drug you need an excuse not to use.
Yes. And
It's really,
Neil, like you would know this because you fought, you had dealt with PTSD after you came back from, was it Afghanistan, right?
Iraq and Afghanistan. I went
Yeah.
to both. Yeah.
So here's something that I found that was really eye-opening for me. And I've done a couple of shows. I have another one coming on sober living. And I don't profess that I never drink. I don't drink often. And I don't drink if I'm not in a good state of mind.
I
And
think you nailed the keys.
yes, because back in the day, why do you think alcohol was coined as spirits? Because
Right.
back in the day, they say when you drink, it's almost like it pokes holes into your aura, allows
Hmm.
spirits to enter. And if you're in a really bad, and I know I'm talking about stuff that's more esoteric, but I don't care because it really makes sense to me because I've seen it too many times. And I know from my family history that if you do drink alcohol and you are going through stuff, it ain't going to heal you. And that's where a lot of these, I'm going to do quotes, quote unquote, demons can come out.
I mean, the periods in my life where you might say that I had some demon stuff type stuff going on, I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I know that. It's like you said, I think it has so much to do with intent. And I think if you're with friends and it's fun, and you have a few drinks and it loosens you up and you're joking and laughing, like there's probably a lot of upside in that. It's just, how's it being used? When I was coming out of the service, it was like I was drinking a bit on my own, and I mean, it wasn't a positive drinking habit. It was a numbing. I was using it to numb. So I guess, and that's kind of how it is with all these. So what's the intention? What's the why behind the use? You kind of got to understand that, and then understand the right way. There's a proper way.
So let's get into all this about microdosing. What is classified as microdosing? Because I do see a lot as it relates to mushrooms specifically. So what's the deal with microdosing?
Yeah, microdosing is generally defined as a non-perceptible dose, so it's a small enough amount that you're not going to feel it. Um, Again, for different people have different tolerances. If you say a full dose of mushrooms is like 2.5 grams, which I think is, you'll feel that, like no question, you're going to feel two
Two
and a
and
half grams of mushroom.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Did you just say 2.5 grams is a
That would be like
full
a
dose?
full dose of mushrooms, like in a psilocybin session, like what you'd see in a clinical trial. Yeah, 2.5 to 3.
Oh my God, that's so
Then
okay. Because like,
so,
like
but that's that. But microdose would be a tenth of that. So 0.25 grams would be a microdose
okay, so
ish,
250 milligrams, right? Is that right?
micrograms. Yeah,
Micrograms.
yeah.
Okay. Because I'm like, that sounds really high. Because, I'm just going by what we used to do in university, which was, have about a gram each or so we would guesstimate, and that would be more than enough. So that just sounds really high.
Um, yeah, well, it depends on what it's for. I mean, a gram, some people might say that's more like a friend hike museum dose. I think people would say is between a half gram and a gram, depending on who you are. And so then a microdose, if you're kind of the dose you're familiar with as a gram would be like a tenth of a gram.
Mm, okay.
2.5, when I say 2.5, that's like what I would say is for like eye mask, headphones, facilitated session like you'd see in a clinical trial.
Okay.
That's how they do it there. And then yeah, people's tolerances are so different. And so I think it can be anywhere between that point 0.1 to zero point 0.5. Some people like to be able to notice it just a little bit. Um, and the interesting thing with microdosing is there's a lot of kind of anecdotal reports of benefit, but they have done some studies on it. And it looks like it's no different than placebos based on the data that we have today. Whereas the bigger doses, when done in like a clinical trial for a lot of different indications and desired outcomes, actually does have kind of clear benefit, from a like a from a science perspective. But what I think is happening is I just don't think we have the enough data or the right data around microdosing. Um, so I think that we'll see in time that there actually is some benefit, and I think it also just depends on, again, the context of the use and the way. So I think for a microdose, if it's used like for example with meditation or with some conscious connection with nature, I think you're going to see much higher benefit there than if you take a microdose and kind of just like mindlessly go on with your day without any intentionality around it. So, but we're studying that right now.
I think so. Doesn't some of the research say that microdosing can help with focus and is it and clarity? Does that make sense?
It does, and I think that's true. But what the existing science, the studies today show is no benefit better than placebo. But
Mm,
like I said, I think that
anecdotal.
that's yeah, I think that we just don't have enough data, and it's getting skewed. And this is the problem with science a lot of times. You can arrive at the wrong conclusions because your data can be a little out of whack. I had a professor in my undergrad. This guy is a pretty famous guy, James York. He developed the chaos theory. Ever heard of that? It's that, if a butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the earth, that little permutation can actually like become a hurricane on the other side of the earth. It's like these really small changes can become these huge things. Anyway, he's a famous mathematician, and he started his career in medicine and then ended up in math. And he had this binder that he would bring into, the first day of class and would talk everybody through it. But he like said that he couldn't do medicine anymore because we were always realizing that it was wrong. And so he would have a paper from a journal that said, this is the answer on this. And then he had the cutout from the journal 10 years later, a different journal that said, no, that was wrong. And you'd
Hmm.
flip through this book, And so he went and did math because he said that was at least a little bit more clear. But then even math, you go far enough, deep enough in math, and math starts to kind of get a bit funky too. So it's just like, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. And everything is relative too. It depends.
Yeah, well, you and I kind of touched on that earlier off before we started recording about how science cannot really dictate all, and resonance is really important because of our bio-individuality. It's just like I'm a very little woman. I'm only 5'2". So how could the same dose of, whatever drug be right for you, just like it is for me? Like, science isn't bio-individual. It's not.
Right. Right.
So what you're saying makes sense. And I think we really have to look at how things affect us. So
Right.
some of the anecdotal, I'm going to do evidence from anecdotal, would be focus, concentration. They say that it helps with stress and anxiety,
Mhm.
kind of takes that.
Creativity.
Yeah.
Well, and if you look at what's happening on the big doses on under an fMRI, which can see changes in energy in the brain, the brain lights up under big doses, and parts of the brain that have not connected before or are not connecting as often connect. And so I mean, it's not a massive leap to think that smaller doses would have some effect too, in terms of like opening the brain up. I just think, again, we just haven't. But yeah, that people report lots of different benefit from it. Feeling more peaceful, more connected, create more creative. That makes perfect sense to me. The brain's functioning better for some reason.
Happier. I also read
Happier.
happier. And
Yeah,
I don't know. Like I think that there's a lot that still needs to be explored in that area, but I have
definitely.
been reading about it because I do know a lot of people, myself included. I'm not really I'm just not really resonating much with drinking these
Yeah.
days. And I I didn't say I'm 100% never drinking, but I'm almost moving away from it more. And a lot of people are now choosing to microdose just to
Hmm.
kind of be a little more chill when they go to that party and
Yeah.
everybody's drinking because drinking is so socially acceptable.
Right. Yeah, I think it's positive. I'm super supportive of it. I mean, I think that I kind of with all this stuff, I guess it's like a risk reward upside downside kind of calculation in my mind. But um, mushrooms have been used very widely all over the world for a long, 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 long time. So it's not like all of a sudden we're going to figure out that there's like some issue with them, like some new compound that we just developed in a lab and it's only been in the human use for a few years. And it's not addictive, it's neuroregenerative, it's non-toxic, right? So it's got a lot of benefit from a safety perspective relative to a lot of the things that we use on a regular basis: alcohol, many different pharmaceutical drugs, many of the foods we eat, frankly.
Hmm.
And then, maybe the upside is not definitively clear for everyone yet. But what is? And so, it's worth, experimenting and trying. Just do it in the right place and go start low and go slow and make sure you're getting it from a safe source and, be smart about it. But yeah, I think people are realizing it's not that crazy. There's way more risk, in my opinion, in going out to a bar at night and drinking beers with friends than there is taking some mushrooms, with friends. I think it's
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
clear.
So I guess really, if somebody is interested in psychedelics, a good entry point, if you're not sure, would be to say, okay, well, I'm going to go and experiment just a little bit with microdosing first before I decide if going on a psychedelic journey is right for me. Do you have people who do that first before
Yeah,
they decide? Okay.
yeah, quite a few. I think that's quite common. people will dip their toe in and be experimenting with meditation and then realize, oh, okay, through my own lived experience, I intuit that there's something more here. There's something that's deeper, and okay, let me go do that in a controlled setting. So
Okay,
that's
so
really common.
okay, now what happens at a retreat? Do you have to go away to like, you know, Puerto Rico or like I don't even know where you go. Where do people go? I don't even know. Like, do you have to go away for a retreat?
Well, you know, to do it fully legally today, yes. If
Okay.
you're a Canadian or American, you can do it in Oregon. And you know, I mean, are the feds going to come in there and bust one of those retreat centers? Probably not. I would say it's extraordinarily low chance, but it is federally illegal.
Okay.
Um, but we do programs in Jamaica and the Netherlands where it's fully legal. And, you know, we're there because we think that's important and um, it allows us to do things fully above board, no gray area. We're fully insured. We don't have to, I don't know, for me with this work, it's like you want to do it kind of with the knowing that um, like everything's as it should. It feels these experiences can be kind of a bit disorienting, and if you have in the back of your mind that there's some risk in the law or something like that, then that's not the best environment. So some people have connections in the States and in Canada that have great facilitators and can go into the, you know, do it in a great way. But I think for your average person that isn't in this world um, today, unfortunately, you have to travel to do it in a place that can be above board about it.
So what's the process? Like, okay, you're probably going to laugh at me, but I picture people sitting in a circle and going, "Okay, everybody, now it's time." And then,
That's
like
kind of it.
is
Yeah.
that kind of it? Because
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I got to come. I got to come, Neil.
well, you've got to come down. I mean, it's really beautiful. I mean, the Jamaica, the Netherlands is really special too. But Jamaica to me is just so exceptional. The land and the people and so we do these long form programs. So it's a 5 night experience, and we do two kind of full dose, big dose
Of
sessions. But
of what?
before
Of what?
mushrooms.
So is that 5 days only mushrooms?
Yep. I mean, we're not doing mushrooms on all the days. It's just twice. And
Okay.
then it's what we would call like an integrative health program. So we actually start before the immersive experience with a digital prep. And so if someone joins one of our programs, they get access to our catalog of content. It's a lot of led meditations and breathwork exercises and basics of the central nervous system and Western psychotherapy tools, simple stuff that's free. And, you know, really what we want is people to start developing new habits because we want behavior change, you know, that we want people to start taking better care of themselves. And then our programs are done in a group because we know from adult learning and habit change science that there's actually something quite special that happens amongst a group. If you bring them together and facilitate it the right way, they start taking care of each other. They start looking out for each other. They show up for each other. And you get to meet the facilitators and so we're really thoughtful about how we create a positive group dynamic and then people come to the immersive experience and then we do a lot of those practices that we taught in the prep, but we do them together in beautiful locations, away from everybody, away from everything. And so we're doing meditation and mindful movement, getting our feet barefoot on the ground. And then we do the psilocybin sessions. And then after the immersive, um, we have a 6 week digital follow up, but it's self-directed, you know, so it's not like if you only have a bit of time each week, that works. Some people have much more time and want to, you know, go deeper, then you can kind of go deeper. But after these experiences, there is this, what looks like this kind of window of neuroplasticity. There's this increased openness to change. And so, again, since we're trying to get positive behavior change, we're really encouraging people that's like, okay, this is the time, do the meditations, you know, for at least a few weeks, couple months, really commit to it. And then it looks like some of those habits can stick. And then that's how you really get positive benefit for, a longer period of time, is if you help people learn how to take better care of themselves.
That sounds amazing. I mean, is it okay? Does everybody take the exact same amount?
No,
Okay, that's
it's
because I was asking you that before. Like, I mean, does a little 5'2" woman take the same as a 6'2" man? Like, how does that work?
no, it's it's within a range that is around what you would see in the clinical trials. But it's a discussion between the individual and the senior facilitators. And there's some art to it, but it's within a safe range. But generally, 60% of our guests, it's the first time they've done something like this. They've maybe had some recreational use, but they've never done kind of a big dose. And a lot of times the recreational use didn't go so great. So there's a bit of anxiety, super normal. And so generally on the first one, you go a bit lighter and you let people learn how to steer, learn that it's not so scary. And then also really importantly, the group gels, the rapport gets developed with the facilitators and the guests. And so then everybody's kind of on the same team and everybody's feeling really comfortable. And then in that second session, most people, the vast majority, are ready to go up to a bigger dose and then have a more full experience. Yeah.
Has anybody, because I know that if you take, I think if you take too many mushrooms, you can take like valerian with high doses of vitamin C just to take the edge off, right?
hmm
So if somebody, have you ever had gas clients who have felt like they can't deal with it?
yeah, there's also kind of off over the counter things that are basically the valerian and glucose called like trip stopper um,
Yes. Yeah.
and so we keep those on site if they're needed. It's very rare, um, but sometimes people have like pretty significant experiences. Um, but that's why it's important to have do it in the right setting and have facilitators that have been doing this stuff for a long time because they know what to do. It's normal. And a lot of times what will happen is someone will, because we're doing it in a group, someone will have a big experience. So they'll, body will be a bit more activated. Maybe they'll want to cry or they'll want to express themselves in some way. And then there'll be a point where, they're a little bit self-conscious that they're affecting the group. And,
Yeah.
and, and probably at some point they are affecting the group. Like it's a bit much for what the group dynamic. So then, we have kind of SOPs and one of the helpers will come and with one of the facilitators will take the person usually outside and they just need to go for a walk and get a breath of fresh air and kind of let it loose a little bit and then they can come back in 10-15 minutes and it's fine. It's usually. But we've had a few that, will want the trip stopper and we do that. But yeah.
What about like nausea, or can't that happen too with mushrooms too high of a dose?
Yeah, it can. But you can actually prepare it in a way that really mitigates that.
Mm.
So if you kind of do the lemon, ginger, and then you kind of get the preparation right, we've found that you can really mitigate that. But it's not uncommon for in a group of 15 for one or two to have some nausea for a little period of time. Same thing, it usually passes. If not, you can give some over the counter nausea meds, but usually people it's very well tolerated, which is vastly different than something like ayahuasca where most people will get quite physically ill,
Hmm.
which many of the facilitators in that world would say it's part of the process, and maybe there is some purging that needs to happen. And I don't disagree that that might be the case, but for us, it's we feel we can give people these really profound transformative experiences, and they're just like generally kind of easier and more well tolerated, and so it just makes more sense for us.
So you guys don't do ayahuasca journeys?
No, not right now. I think we really like mushrooms. The research is really clear and growing. There's not as much kind of cultural sensitivity around mushrooms, and we want to be mindful of that and not, um, be upsetting some of these different communities. But at some point, I would hope that we can be a safe place for people to try many of these different compounds. I think they're all, have a special place, and if an adult wants to use them, um, and use them in the right way, then I think they should have the opportunity to.
I know that Beckley, you guys focus on mushrooms, but I heard one story, and a lot of people tell a lot of stories, and I'm not sure if this is accurate or not, but I have heard that with ayahuasca, if the plant shows you something and you choose to go back to your life, not change anything, not do anything that was shown to you, that it's going to be keep being shown to you, that you're not going to be able to unsee it. And so some people might have ongoing anxiety or things like that from ayahuasca. I don't know if it's true.
There are some risks. I mean, again, I think it's a relatively small number, but there's a condition called HHPD, which is basically like after a psychedelic experience, at some point in the future, you'll have a trip again. Now, the majority of people that have that happen say that they actually enjoyed it. They're like, oh, I'm kind of reliving this experience. It's pleasant. But then, the fraction of the fraction that had the experience, some do say it wasn't pleasant. And so that's a real risk, and people need to kind of be aware of that. Um, these aren't risk-free, you know. Relative risk, I think people have to do their own calculations. But yeah, there is risk here, and there's risk in anything. People die from aspirin, or people die from drinking too much water. So I think it's important for people to kind of do their own research, and then make the decision. I was wide open. Like these compounds aren't unique. They have ups, pluses and minuses, like everything.
That's a good time to ask you what the contraindications are. It's like, who's somebody who's not a good candidate? I think I heard if you have like schizophrenia or something like that, that maybe it's not right for you. Or what are the contraindications for? Let's talk about mushrooms specifically, since that's what we're talking mostly about.
Yeah. So, our programs, again, they're non-medical, so we don't diagnose or treat anything. And we're also managing for a group dynamic. And so we screen people out that have, more severe indications. So we're just not configured to work with people today that have treatment resistant depression or PTSD, or actually are on any mood altering psychiatric meds. So that's kind of our, um, standards for working. Then, you mentioned schizophrenia as a good example. The consensus was for quite some time, you would never want to give psychedelics to someone that had schizophrenia because it could create an episode. It could exacerbate the problem. Now, I think that that's still widely kind of the accepted philosophy, but there are some researchers that are saying, no, actually, you can help people that have schizophrenia with psychedelics. It just needs to be done in a really controlled way under a whole lot of care, because you're going to kind of open things up, and you're going to create some destabilization. But in that destabilized state, in that openness again, you can actually help get in there and fix things. So I think it depends, and um, so a lot of these kind of ones that we put in this bucket of like, no, not never. Some are saying, well, it just needs to be done in the right context. And then there are some concerns with the heart. So that's pretty clear. If you had um, heart conditions, then you need to tread very carefully with mushrooms. So
Really? I
there's,
never heard that, Neil.
yeah, yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah. And it looks like, again, that's one of the risks potentially. We don't know for sure, but of kind of overuse, over long time use, it looks like it can have some negative cardiac effects. But yeah, if someone has kind of severe heart issues, you'd want to be uber careful. And we wouldn't allow someone that had that on one of our programs. That's too much for us.
Interesting. I never heard that. Is that because like your heart, like does your heart rate elevate when you take mushrooms?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, for most. So it looks like it puts, but again, for a healthy person, it's not significant. Um, it's doesn't look like it's much worse, any worse than going for a run. But yeah, if you put a heart rate monitor on someone and give them a big dose of mushrooms, their heart rate goes up, and their blood pressure can go up. And so it's similar, everybody's different. People are more sensitive to different things. And so it just depends, But if you have concerns around your heart, you want to ask some more questions. That's something that's pretty clear.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's one I haven't heard. So I think we covered a lot in this episode, but I have to ask you some really cool outcomes of people who have gone to your retreats. And I'm sure that you stay
Oh,
in touch with some and things.
I've got a bunch.
I'd love to
You
hear
want to
a
hear a
couple of
couple?
stories. Yeah.
Steve and Marcia, the 86-year-old man and the 80-year-old woman that came for the married couple that came for the her 80th birthday, came on a program a couple years ago. Had lived a very colorful life, were very successful, lived in different parts of the world, kids, and came down to just explore. They were just the coolest older people, and didn't really have any kind of intentions. They didn't really have any problems. They just kind of were wanting to adventure a little bit. And they came down, and um, they said it was one of the most meaningful experiences of their life. And then now they completely stopped drinking. They didn't think that they didn't have a drinking problem, but they just like have no desire to drink. And Steve and Marcia to this day do this little tea ceremony with each other each morning and meditate together. And it's
Mm.
just like the sweetest, cutest thing to hear them talk about it. But it was big for them, and for 88% of our guests say it's the most meaningful or one of the most meaningful experiences of their life. I mean, that's significant. Um, Another one, this is getting into this more kind of woo realm, but I mean, I guess it's not so woo because we are electromagnetic beings that have a central nervous system, and that we know that we can pick up on each other's central nervous systems. Like we can see that in the science now, but we don't understand like all the mechanics, so it's still a bit, there's still a lot of questions around it. But one of my buddies, a special forces veteran, um, and went to Wharton and then was like a finance guy, and so he was just like this very alpha male, high functioning guy in a lot of ways, but had some wounds from his time in the service. But he had buried them, and he thought that this was, he knew I was doing this, and for a long time thought it was, this is nuts. And then over time started asking me more questions about it, and then finally came on a program in the Netherlands, and I was there and came with another friend of ours, another military veteran, had this profound experience and released a lot, like cried a lot. And then I caught up with him the next week after he went home and was like, "Hey man, like how's it feeling? And like, are you noticing any shifts?" And he's like tearing up. I could hear him like, kind of choking up. He's like, "Man," he's like, it's hard to be to put in words. It's been so sweet being back home." I'm like, "Well, tell me what you're noticing." And he's like, "Well, his son was 4, I think." Um, he's like, "My son, for the last, since he could walk or whatever, wouldn't want to come to him at night when it was bedtime. He'd always go to mom." and it just drove him nuts because he wanted to kind of, that was his time to be with him. And, you know, and it really, obviously it really bothered him. And then he said that that week he was home, that his son was just gravitating towards him, just like falling into his lap at night. And it just was like, how do you value that? How do you put a price on that? It's just like priceless. And he just said that it was just so sweet. And so what happened? I mean, something shifted in his central nervous system to an extent that his son felt more close to him, felt more safe around him, you know? And so incredibly beautiful. And I mean, there's things I could kind of go on for hours around some of these like really beautiful things that we get the chance to see on these programs. It's really special.
Well, I think that as humans, we do carry a lot of heaviness, and we're all different. Like I always say that we're all so different. So what might be heavy to you is not heavy to me. Or, like I might carry something might carry a different weight, but we carry it. And if we don't have tools to help peel those layers, I don't think we can fully be light human beings on this planet and experience what we're meant to experience if we've got all this weight on us. So if we could just kind of take a little bit off. I mean, the one thing I heard, and this woman, Neil, she is like massively into energy work. And I do think that psychedelics can help with that energy work, especially for those people who are like, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not doing that. But then they'll be like, okay, I'll try psychedelics. It's like, there's all these people who will say, I'm not going to try that. That's stupid. Like whatever energy work that might be, meditation. Oh, it's stupid. But then they'll be like, all right, I'll do psychedelics. And then all of a sudden, they're just this lighter human being. And they've
Yeah.
taken some of those layers off. Right. But if we're always, like we were talking about, if you're always doing the work, it's kind of like some stuff piles on. Okay, let's clear that. This is like one of those amazing tools that can help.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that these experiences, if done in the right way, and these compounds, these plants can be complementary to a lot of this like energy work because it again it kind of creates this openness, you know, and so I mean I would love to study this over time, but Reiki would have gotten you laughed out of a medical school 10 years ago. Now it's actually starting to get introduced into the healthcare system. And there was this article in the New York Times, and I just love the headline of it because it says, there's no scientific reason why Reiki should work. So why does it? And it's like, well, we just don't understand the mechanics yet. There's something going on here, you know, and we should humble ourselves a little bit and be open to the fact that maybe we don't understand everything there is to understand today,
And
like
maybe
has
we're
been the
not
case
meant
at
to.
yeah,
Maybe we're not
maybe,
meant
yeah,
to.
maybe, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or it's not real, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will mention this. Two documentaries that I find or found very transformative. One is pretty new. It's called It's Time. And it talks, have you seen it or heard of it?
No.
Talks about the power that humans actually have within us. It's called It's Time. I think it's time.love is the actual handle. I don't know if it's the Instagram handle or their website, but
Mm.
it really talks about how as humans we've really kind of gone away from that knowingness within us. And anything that we can do to tap into that knowingness, which might be a mixture of things, which is what I do. I do a multitude of these practices. And what it does is, it's not about going and buying, whatever $300 grounding sheets. Like, we don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, let's just tap into what's in here. and maybe go put bare feet on the ground and go for a walk in the forest, and then maybe doing a psychedelic retreat might be helpful, or maybe microdosing is something else, or maybe Reiki, or and I'm sure you've heard of EFT tapping, that
Hmm.
now that it is being more recognized. And that's what kills me, is that, Neil, I've been doing all this stuff ever since, you know, gosh, it's been about 13, 14 years since my daughter was sick. I started to explore all of these more esoteric, unproven, not necessarily scientific practices. And anybody who's listening to this, I encourage you to just kind of explore it. Don't look for that research that proves that it works.
Right. I agree. Yeah, just make sure it's yeah, I think it's more about just like check the safety. And
Yes,
if it's safe, then experiment, test it, see, and then tune into that internal compass. And that's going to be more accurate than, you know, a study or a doctor that doesn't really know you. And we can learn from the studies and from the doctors, and you should
mhm,
take all those data points, but no one is going to have the insight that you're able to have into, what makes you feel better and, what you need. It's just we've
absolutely.
really gotten away from that. We've kind of outsourced that knowledge to experts.
Yeah, experts. Okay. And you guys who are just listening, you don't see that I keep doing these air quotes. Neil, tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, we're on the interwebs, beckleyretreats.com. We're on social media. It's just Beckley Retreats. And we do group Q&A sessions. So if you want to join one of those, we do them a few times a week. You can come and ask any questions. We do one-on-one calls if you want to, ask in a little bit more private setting. And we're, a relatively small company that really cares. And so, we're super responsive and we'll find time to get you the information that you need. It's not uncommon for us to have multiple calls with people because they have lots of questions and they want to go do research and then they want to come back, and like that's all good for us. We're happy to do it. So we're easy to find.
Perfect. I will have all the information, the links in the show description as well. Thank you so much, Neil.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure
It was
chatting with
really
you.
lovely speaking with you. I hope you come on a program. We got to talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we will. We're going to keep in touch for sure. Thank you, Neil.
Lovely. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to share it with someone you know might benefit. And always remember, when you rate, review, subscribe, you help to support my content and help me to keep going and bringing these conversations to you each and every week. Join me next week for a new topic, new guest, new exciting conversations to help you live your best life.